All right, today we're going to tackle the super complex world of enterprise blockchain, and we're going to do it by looking at a platform that's actually making it happen, Kaleido. So if you've ever looked at one of those big corporate blockchain projects and wondered, hey, why did that just fizzle out? Well, you're in the right place. We're about to pull back the curtain on the massive hidden obstacle that stops these projects in their tracks, and then we'll look at the platform that was built from the ground up to just smash right through it. Let's dive in.
You know, if you go back to the early days of enterprise blockchain, maybe around 2017, the hardest part was just getting a node online and, making sure it didn't crash. But that's not the problem anymore. That's the easy part now. As this quote here says, the whole problem has completely flipped on its head. A way bigger, more complicated challenge has taken its place.
And this is the scale of that challenge. See, the actual blockchain part, the node, the ledger, that's only about 10% of what you need to build a real production-ready solution for a big company. The other 90% is all the stuff on top. It's the middleware, the data privacy tools, the integrations, the security, the whole shebang. This is the hidden iceberg that completely sank so many of those early projects, leaving these billion-dollar ideas right at the bottom of the ocean. This is what we call the 90% problem.
So yeah, let's start right there with this billion-dollar problem. I mean, we all saw it, right? Huge names, Microsoft, IBM, launching these big blockchain services with all this hype, only for them to get quietly shut down a few years later. This first part is all about figuring out why so many of these promising pilots got stuck in what you might call production purgatory. And this slide just lays it out perfectly. Over on the left, you've got the simple stuff, the early challenges that got solved pretty quick. But on the right, that's the real boss battle. It's not about just keeping a node running anymore. It's about orchestrating an entire technology stack, figuring out how to handle private data between competitors, securing all the crypto keys, and, this is the absolute killer, plugging this brand new tech into the ancient legacy systems that actually run the business. That's where the real nightmare begins.
So here's the key takeaway. The pilots weren't failing because the blockchain itself was broken. No, they were failing because all the digital plumbing was missing. You had developers spending like 80% of their time just building foundational code, boring stuff like event listeners and data indexers, instead of the actual cool business app they were supposed to be creating in the first place. Okay, so how do you fix a problem that big? Well, this is where Kaleido comes into the story. They saw that 90% problem and decided to build the solution for it. But they didn't just create another service to run nodes. Nope. They defined an entirely new category of software to solve the whole problem. The Blockchain Business Cloud.
So what on earth is a blockchain business cloud? Well, think of it as an all-in-one platform. It's like, instead of just giving you a raw, powerful engine, which is the blockchain, they built the entire car around it. The transmission, the chassis, the onboard computer, the wheels, everything is already integrated and ready to go. You just get in and drive, instead of having to build the whole car from scratch yourself. And here's how they structure it. It basically breaks down into these three layers. At the very bottom, you've got the core infrastructure, the nodes and the networks. Then in the middle, you have that absolutely critical digital plumbing, the middleware. And right at the top, you've got the application services, the actual tools that developers use to build stuff. This full-stack approach is their entire philosophy.
Now, one of the smartest things Kaleido did was to stay neutral. They support all the big enterprise protocols. We're talking Ethereum, Hyperledger Fabric, and Corda. This makes them kind of like the Switzerland of the blockchain world. And for a big company, this is huge because it de-risks their decision. They don't have to bet the farm on one protocol that might be obsolete in 5 years.
Okay, so now we're going to get our hands a little dirty. Let's dive into the tech itself and see how Kaleido actually solves some of the gnarliest problems that have been holding back enterprise adoption. And we're going to start right at the very foundation.
All right, here's a classic problem. Imagine you're building a network with a bunch of your competitors. You can't just run all the nodes in your company's Amazon Web Services account, right? I mean, that's not decentralized. That's just your database with extra steps. So how do you build a real consortium without creating a single point of failure or getting locked into one cloud vendor?
The answer is this really cool thing they call border-free networking. Basically, it lets you have one single blockchain network that stretches across multiple clouds and multiple countries at the same time. You can have a node running in AWS in the US, another one in Microsoft Azure in Germany, and a third in your own data center in Singapore, all talking to each other like they're in the same room. This is so important for resiliency and for complying with data laws like GDPR.
Okay, but what if you're a bank?
or a defense contractor, or a healthcare company. Your chief information security officer is probably going to have a heart attack if you suggest opening up the company's private network to incoming connections from the public cloud. It's a huge security no-no. So how do you bridge that gap?
The solution they came up with is actually pretty brilliant. It's called their private stack. So think about it this way. Normally, you'd have to poke a hole in your firewall to let the cloud network in, which, makes security folks very nervous. Instead, a tiny piece of software inside your secure data center makes a phone call out to the cloud. It's an outbound-only connection that creates this secure reverse tunnel. It's basically a one-way street that keeps the security team happy because it brings the cloud to your data, not the other way around.
Now let's move up the stack a bit to that middleware layer. And you can see the huge difference that something like Hyperledger FireFly makes. Trying to build an app directly on a raw node, like you see on the left, it's a complete nightmare. You're managing everything by hand. But on the right, FireFly gives you this clean, simple API that hides all that complexity. It literally turns months of painful development work into weeks.
And now, for the holy grail of enterprise blockchain, privacy. Look, it's pretty easy to make a transaction private between two people. The problem is, as soon as you do that, you create these little isolated data islands. And those islands can't talk to each other, which means you can't do really important financial stuff like an atomic swap, where you exchange a stock for cash at the exact same time. It's what's known as the privacy paradox.
Kaleido's answer to this is a framework they built called Paladin. It uses some seriously advanced crypto called zero-knowledge proofs. The best way to think about it is this. It's like being able to prove you know a secret password without ever having to tell anyone what the password is. The network can mathematically prove a transaction is valid without ever seeing the sensitive details, like who sent it, who received it, or how much it was for. This is a total game changer. It moves privacy from security through hiding things to security through pure math.
So all this amazing tech isn't just sitting in a lab somewhere. Let's shift gears and look at how it's actually being proven out in the real world, specifically by some of the biggest players who are building the future of finance right now.
I mean, it really doesn't get much bigger than this. Swift, the messaging network that basically runs the entire global banking system, chose Kaleido to power their sandbox for central bank digital currencies. When you have 18 central banks, including the Bank of France, trusting your platform to test out the future of money, well, that's about as strong an endorsement as you can possibly get.
Next up is Fireblocks, who are the absolute leaders in institutional-grade crypto custody. For any serious bank or financial institution, separating the app that requests a payment from the super secure system that actually signs and approves it is a non-negotiable requirement from regulators. Kaleido's built-in integration with Fireblocks solves this problem right out of the box. And finally, there's Ubix, a new network that's being built to clear and settle stablecoin payments between banks. Kaleido isn't just a vendor here, they are a launch partner, providing the core connectivity. This really shows how they've evolved from just a tech provider to becoming a fundamental piece of the next-generation financial plumbing.
Okay, let's bring it all home. What does all this actually mean for a big company that's looking at digital assets and tokenization today? It means there is now a clear, well-lit bridge to get from just experimenting with this stuff to putting it into the real world.
So let's just recap the whole value proposition. First, Kaleido gives you a full-stack solution to that massive 90% problem we talked about. It de-risks your big tech decisions by being protocol neutral. It gives you all the digital plumbing you need to build way, way faster. It solves the incredibly difficult problems of institutional-grade privacy and custody. And when you add it all up, it becomes this essential bridge between the old world of traditional finance and the new world of DeFi. It's the lowest risk, fastest way to get a real project up and running.
And that really leaves us with one last question to think about. So much of the conversation is framed as a battle, right? It's Wall Street versus crypto, TradFi versus DeFi. But what if the future isn't a conflict at all? What if it's a convergence? The real question then becomes, who's going to build the bridges between these two worlds? And I think platforms like Kaleido are making a pretty strong bet that the future belongs not to the warriors, but to the engineers.